Hi, Bill the Flavor Guy here, answering your questions, and we got a few good ones for you, so let's get right to it. Are there specific cuisines or dishes more prone to overflavoring, and what factors contribute to this tendency? It's more about sweetness and acidity. If something has a lot of sweetness in it, or acidic, a lot of ethnic dishes, certainly Indian foods, and you add flavor to them, because that acidity is there, and if there's sweetness with it, man, that's really already driving whatever's there. And now you add flavor to it, and you can only add a tiny amount of flavor because you've done everything right, or naturally everything's kind of come together. You've got acidity, you've got sweetness, and if it's a dish that's heated, you've got volatility. Flavors are getting hot. When it comes to adding flavors to these kinds of products, you got to be very careful. It's a very small amount. I don't recommend doing this if you're having people over, like your future in-laws. You should experiment on yourself and someone that's close to you, friend or family, that knows you're playing, experimenting, because you're going to end up possibly throwing that meal away. It's such a small amount of flavor, and because you can't really weigh it out, it's really going to be more like a chef, where you're just going to be dropping drops of flavor in or sprinkling the powder around. And here's the thing, even after you do all that, the flavor is going to settle over a period of hours possibly, and tomorrow, if you taste it again, it could be even stronger in flavor, because now the flavor's had a chance to kind of layer through the starches or protein, whatever's in that dish. Kind of keep that in mind. If you want to manage that more, you can always add some sweetness to it, or you can even add acidity to a dish, and that also will help drive the flavor. But be very careful. Temperature plays a huge role. Fat plays a role. If there's a lot of fat in the food and it's coating your palate, flavors aren't tasted in the mouth, they're tasted actually in the nose. As the fat kind of gets washed away by your saliva, the sweetness and the acidity, the savoriness of it, the salts, they start to come alive, and then all of a sudden the flavor blooms. And it gets really complex. And so for that, you got to practice. You have to play with it a little bit. And it may take you 2, 3, 5, 10 times before you get it right. If you master this, you can make some pretty incredible dishes. Very difficult to duplicate. Hope that answers your question. Another great question, can you roast coffee beans with fruit rinds? And let me add to that, can you add anything to the coffee beans as you're roasting? And the answer is yes. That's awesome. That's a great way to make a flavored coffee. You could put cocoa beans in there, cocoa nibs, and roast those at the same time. You could put almonds in there, have to be raw of course. You could put peanuts, if you don't have any allergies by the way to all these suggestions. You could take dandelion root, that if you're brave enough and you want to dig up some dandelion root in your front yard, clean it really good, dry it, chop it up, and throw that in there, and it actually makes a kind of a coffee note. It has the same kinds of pyrazines that are created as the root is roasting. Here's the thing about putting orange peels. This question customer is asking, can I do orange peels too? If you've ever roasted coffee, a multitude of stages you have to go through. You put the green beans in there, and the temperature has to get really hot, several hundred degrees, actually more than that, but it takes a while to get there. So the question would be, when do I put the orange peel in, or lemon peel, if I want to get that flavor? And you wouldn't want to use lemon peel, because as the lemon peel roasts, it's going to smell like a skunk. But the orange peel actually smells pretty cool. So you have to experiment. If you have a little tabletop coffee roaster, I would recommend doing it that way. If you have a big roaster like what we have here, probably have to develop a method, so it's a little more complex. And if you're into roasting coffees in that big of a machine, you know what I'm talking about, so I don't need to go into detail. But on a little tabletop, you'd want to get to what's called the first crack. And as soon as you see that first crack happening, that's where the bean is nice and tan, but still kind of blonde. We call it a blonde bean. It's not quite roasted enough. If you were to grind that bean at that point, it would taste like cardboard. I've had some accidental experiments like that where you just want to spit that coffee out. But that's at the first crack. In between the first crack and the second crack is like that spot, that sweet spot where you want to add stuff like orange peels, right? Or some other kind of fruit, dried fruit. And you could put mangoes in there. As long as there's not a lot of moisture in there, you can get crazy with this idea. It's actually a really good question. If you're doing like nuts and things like almonds or hazelnuts, things like that, probably want to put them in right before you get to the first crack. And so this requires experimentation and failure to develop a method for your tabletop machine. Best thing you can do is make good notes, make your mistakes. You're gonna make a bunch, but every time you make them, you write them down and you learn. Maybe even keep a timer in front of you so you can watch it. This is roasting coffee is an art. It's not a science. It's something you develop, and it's affected by the temperature of the day, You know, if you do it early in the morning when it's cold, it's gonna take longer. If there's lots of humidity in the air, that's gonna slow it down. It's gonna affect the flavor as well. So all those things considered when you want to flavor coffees naturally. Or you could just come to Nature's Flavors and buy some nice cool flavor oils that are developed just for what you want to do. You go through the roasting process, you let it cool off, you put it in a mason jar, you squirt some of that or drop some of that really cool flavor oil from Nature's Flavors, shake it good, let it sit for 24 hours, and tomorrow you've got whatever flavor you want. It says, I'm looking for a product that would be ideal flavoring gummies. I previously experimented with your emulsions, but unfortunately it imparted a maple syrup taste. Please recommend an alternative product that would better suit my needs. Well, probably we're on the right track. Using a flavor emulsion is the right flavor to use in a gummy. I would also recommend a flavor emulsion called a high heat emulsion. We have that on the website as well. But here's the thing, most likely added a little bit too much of the flavor, and then you got a burn off of the flavor and it left behind. The volatiles disappeared, a lot of them went away, and some of the heavier notes stayed behind. I would recommend going to this high heat emulsion that can take a lot of heat. You'll use even less flavor. It sounds to me like this was more of a case of over flavoring. We didn't create a new flavor by the maple. Sometimes that can happen if your sugar burns. You start to go toward a caramelization, but it's pretty hard to do with gummies. I mean, if your gummy turned into a rock hard candy, then you hit the hardball stage, and that's exactly what it is. But I'm thinking that it's probably just an overuse of the flavor. Try using a high heat emulsion. Those flavors are designed to take a lot of heat. They're built to be really slow in releasing their volatility, and I think that would probably work much better for your application. Anytime you have high heat and time, it's the enemy of the flavor. The flavor does not want to be heated. Why kitchens smell so good, flavor's trying to get away, and they don't like being heated for long periods of time. So you need a flavor that can take that kind of abuse, say 30 minutes at 375 degrees. We have those flavors. That's the high heat emulsions. Try that and see if that works for you. Keep those suggestions coming. Like us on Facebook. No? Like us on Instagram? Keep this rolling. I want people to know I make mistakes here.
Like, subscribe, and comment.
Like, subscribe, and comment. Coming from that guy behind the camera. Yeah, do all those things. Hope this helps.